online on Classic Country, AM 1450 here on this Tuesday. Our guest, Chris Graham of the Augusta Free Press, here to talk about Virginia sports, mainly high school, and of course college football. We'll get to high school in just a couple of seconds, Chris, but let's talk about the most recent activity for the ACC schools in the region. UVA, Virginia Tech, UVA losing to Georgia Tech, and Virginia Tech outside the conference knocking off Central Michigan last weekend.
Well, we'll talk about that one first, maybe real quick. The Virginia Tech win over Central Michigan, just a game that they needed. You know, you look on the schedule and you say that should be a win, but in this season, especially with Virginia Tech and that loss to JMU back in September, you don't really say a game is a win until they actually go out there and play the game. And the Hokies did what they needed to do against a decent MAC team in Central Michigan. You know, they really controlled that game. Central Michigan had lost to Northwestern, a team that's on the fringe of the top 25, just by 5 points earlier this season. So for the Hokies to go out there and dominate the way they did, it was 7-7 after one quarter, but they took control in the second quarter and really cruised from there. They did what they needed to do. Virginia, on the other hand, another big loss at Georgia Tech. The final score looked decent, 33-21, but really the Yellow Jackets dominated. 477 yards rushing, an ACC high this season, and that's a high for any season, really, 477 yards on the ground. The Cavs really struggled to move the ball. In the end, they had over 370 yards of total offense, but most of that was in the fourth quarter. They had one 98-yard drive against second-team defense that really added to their numbers there. The Cavs really went out, looked like they went out in game plan to say on offense, let's just not beat ourselves. And for a while it worked. It kept them close. They played a bend but don't break defense that forced a couple of turnovers in the red zone and a couple field goal attempts out of Georgia Tech. But in the end, Georgia Tech just had too much. And I think what we're seeing is that the talent gap that was evident the last couple of years of the Al Groh era is still there. Mike London is doing the best he can with his coaching staff to keep games close. And I give him credit. They've kept games closer than they probably should have been. But, against the ACC powers, they're just going to have a hard time.
Really quick, let's talk about UVA a little bit. First of all, their loss to Georgia Tech, and second of all, as you mentioned, they've got North Carolina coming up this weekend.
Yeah, that Georgia Tech loss really sets the tone. I mean, the loss to Florida State went out and really hammered Miami. I said last week on this show that I thought Florida State looked like to me a top 10 team, and I think they showed that in their win over Miami. So there's no glory in that loss. Maybe Georgia Tech's on a roll now too. Carolina comes into town now. This is a game, a series that Virginia has really owned of late, and particularly at home. I mean, they've won, I think, the last 4 in this series overall, and they've not lost to Carolina in Charlottesville since the early 80s. I think I've put this down, and I have to verify this, but I think Carolina has not beaten Virginia in Charlottesville since Lawrence Taylor played there. So that's been a while. And for reasons that really make no sense, Virginia has won games in this series against much better Carolina teams in Charlottesville. I'm thinking back to the Mac Brown era. Mac Brown couldn't win in Charlottesville. Even a couple years ago, that Carolina team had a lead late. Virginia came back, tied it, and won in overtime. So going into this game now, you got a Virginia team that's really overmatched by a lot of good ACC teams. But Carolina, of course, with the news that finally going ahead and suspending for the rest of the season and really effectively for the rest of their Carolina careers, two key players, Marvin Alston and Greg Little, for improper contact with agents and improper benefits received. They had not played all season, but this finally puts the nail in the coffin as far as their college careers are concerned, and a distraction once again, for the Carolina program heading into this game. So the Cavs, licking their wounds a bit after these big losses to Florida State and Georgia Tech, and we'll see if the Carolina game can be a cure for their hangover.
Carolina's I guess about a 6-7 point favorite. Is this a big game for UVA to the point where, if they don't win, a lot of people, before the season probably was talking 2-9, 3-8, 4-7. I guess, 3-8, 4-7, 5-6, all that's still possible if the Cavaliers were to collapse in the second half of the season.
Yeah, it is. And I don't know if I would say collapse. I think the fan base got a little happy with the wins over Richmond and VMI. The Richmond win over a team that going into the season was a top 5 1AA team. Now they've struggled a little bit this season. They lost their quarterback Aaron Corp on Saturday for the rest of the season, and so Richmond's going to struggle the rest of the way. But wins over 1AA teams, they got the fan base excited. The good performance at USC at Southern Cal was part of that as well. They didn't win that game out there, but they played well in losing by 3 points at Southern Cal, and so The fan base was like, hey, maybe we can win 6 or 7 games with this team now all of a sudden, and now the Southern Cal game's looking more like an aberration than anything else. But, I say that, and Florida State again. Florida State and Georgia Tech are two teams that were predicted to be at the top of the conference this year, or now are near the top of the conference this year. So this Carolina game does have some meaning for Virginia. If they can go out and win this game, and they can even their record at 3-3, get a win in the ACC, there are some games on their schedule as the season goes on. Next week they got Eastern Michigan coming into town. They have Boston College as a game that could be a winnable game. Maryland is a winnable game. Duke's a winnable game. If they can win this game this weekend and do what they need to do against Eastern Michigan, they could still conceivably win 6 or 7 games this year. And if you can do that with if Mike Leonard can do that in his first season with this talent group that he has in place right now, then that says a lot for the future of this program. But a loss here, and it makes it 3 straight in the ACC, and who knows what can happen from here. Yeah, the season could really turn on this game, and it's not like they're competing for an ACC championship or anything of that nature. It's simply, let's just play some good football and have something to build on for the future. And I think you want to have 5 or 6 or 7 wins to be able to build for the future on. This game is key to that effort, I think.
And I would imagine coming up on Saturday, Virginia Tech expected to probably beat Wake Forest by 3-4 touchdowns.
I would be surprised. Wake Forest this is not the recent Wake Forest teams that Jim Grope had that were competitive. They went to the Orange Bowl a few years ago. Really a regression, it seems, a big-time regression this season in particular. We kind of expected something when Riley Skinner, the 4-year starting quarterback, went. He finally left, graduated, moved on from his really glorious run there in Winston-Salem. But I don't know that people expected, just because Riley Skinner was gone, that the whole team would play the way they've played. Riley Skinner didn't play defense, for example, and their defense has been atrocious this year. And so it's really been a surprising season in Wake Forest. And so with Wake Forest coming to town, the Hokies again, and I don't think they'll ever overlook anybody. At least this team won't ever overlook anybody again after that JMU game. But I think if Tech does what they need to do in this game, they should win pretty handily. They have a lot more talent on the field. Go out there, put some points up early, and then run the ball, and they'll win this game pretty easily. So, yeah.
I look at some of the other ACC games. Boy, this one looks like it's going to be pretty ugly on Saturday. Florida State, Boston College. Florida State may well be the best team in the ACC. Boston College arguably could be the worst.
I think you could be right on both those counts. Certainly Florida State, what I've seen out of them in person, and then what we saw of them on TV last week with Miami. That Oklahoma game is the surprising one now. They lost that one 47-17 back in, I think it was week 2. That one seems to be the one that's the outlier, so to speak, as far as their results go. That Florida State team is a pretty good team. They've got speed on both sides of the ball. Their lines are dominant on both sides of the ball. They've got great skilled players. Christian Ponder is a senior quarterback who's very effective and efficient. And Boston College, on the other hand, is a team that they get a lot of respect because they seem, Frank Spaziani and his predecessors, Greg Jagosinski and Tom O'Brien, seem to have been able to do a lot with a little. But this year's team maybe hit its wall, kind of like Wake Forest in a way. They win games in past years that they maybe shouldn't, and this year they're losing games, that maybe they should, but they're not even playing well in those games. So yeah, this one has the makings of roadkill all over it, I think, and Florida State, I'd be surprised if there's any kind of contest between these two teams.
Clemson, I guess, looks like it's going to be a middle of the pack, maybe upper middle of the pack ACC team, and Clemson gets Maryland this weekend.
And here's another one where Clemson, I think, they had that lead that they blew and lost eventually at Auburn, and a game now that they controlled that game most of the way, and Auburn's a top 10 team now, so that says a lot about where Clemson has in terms of its potential. And Maryland, a team that really, their record would indicate one thing about them, but their play on the field indicates another. They're a team that's overmatched in a lot of against good ACC teams, and I think this will be a game where I'd be surprised if Clemson doesn't come out and establish early control and win this one pretty handily. But Ralph Friedgen has kept a couple of games close this year that probably shouldn't have been. The Navy game, they actually won. They gave up almost 500 yards in offense, but stopped Navy a few times inside the 10, and so you still got to go out and beat a Ralph Friedgen team. But I think that Clemson's got a lot. Clemson's going to be pretty tough this weekend.
And this could really be a blowout weekend in the ACC because Miami is on the road to Duke.
Yeah, Miami and Duke, a Duke team that is obviously household trouble, just like Wake stopping people this year. David Cutcliffe really, going into the season, I remember back at the ACC football kickoff, there was a lot of buzz around the Cutcliffe table about the step up that a lot of people thought they'd make. They won 5 games last year. They really had a shot late in the season. If they could have won one more game, they could have potentially been bowl eligible. And of course, Cutcliffe was being wooed by Tennessee. He had an opportunity to interview for that job and take over that job at a place where he'd been an assistant coach before. He turned down the opportunity because he thought he had Duke really moving in the right direction. And, you mentioned Boston College maybe being the worst team in the ACC. Duke is certainly in that mix too. And they can't stop anybody. They're having trouble scoring, which is not a surprise in a sense. Thad Lewis, their great quarterback, moved on to the pros. I think he was in a couple of NFL camps this summer. But they just haven't really hit anything on the cylinders that Cutcliffe and that fan base had expected. So yeah, that's a game where Miami gets to lick its wounds a little bit after that big loss to Florida State last week and go out and get a win and get healthy again, I guess you can say.
How about VMI? VMI losing at Stony Brook last Saturday. Now VMI gets Liberty at home, and Liberty obviously trying to prove that the Flames are the class of the Big South.
Yeah, that's not the way you want to head into that Liberty game, is it? To lose to Stony Brook? No, nothing bad to lose to Stony Brook, but you want to go in with a little bit more confidence than VMI probably has right now. And they had a couple of good performances before that, so we'll see. Liberty certainly is the class of the league, and they get the best shot of everybody in the Big South. There's no question that it doesn't matter what you did the week before, that if you have Liberty, you circle that with a big red marker on the schedule, and everybody's looking forward to that game. And VMI here has their chance now. They've tussled with Virginia and hung with them for a quarter, and they've won a Big South game, and now they got a chance here if things go their way against Liberty to post a big win there. So that the guys there are thinking that here's their chance to do something. And of course for Liberty, they've been in the position the last few years in the Big South of knowing that, hey, we're going to get the best shot of these teams, so we have to go out there and play every week. And they've got to win over a 1A team in Ball State, and they've also tasted defeat this year. So for Liberty, now with the Big South and having an automatic bid into the 16-team tournament, they know they've sort of been working towards this for a few years to put the conference in that position, and now they have a chance. They got to go out and win, and they can't slip up against a team like VMI that can do some things to you with the points they can put on the board on offense some weeks.
Speaking of future weeks, Chris, really quick, what's your take on how JMU's season is shaping up right now, and can JMU afford very few more losses down the road?
Well, they escaped Towson, the CAA doormat, with a win over the weekend. A game that was much closer than anybody expected. And really, they've had a Tech hangover, we can call it, since the September 11th win over Virginia Tech. They've not really played, scintillating football since then. The 10-3 win over Liberty, there's nothing wrong beating Liberty. I mean, obviously, we just talked about Liberty being a team that's in the mix for an NCAA tournament berth, but only scoring 10 points in that game, then they lose at home to Delaware 13-10. Again, Delaware's a top 5 team in 1AA, but you lose at home, and then you barely beat Towson. Yeah. The CAA is shaping up a little more favorably maybe than we had thought it would. Richmond's just been devastated by injuries, and so that could be a more favorable game for JMU than had been anticipated. But you still got Villanova, you still got William & Mary, on the schedule. You still got UMass on the schedule, and I think the people who put the tournament together realize that the CAA is a gauntlet, and there's nothing wrong with a team coming out of the CAA with 2 or 3 or even 4 losses, but JMU's already got their 1 loss. I think that they have to be worried. I mean, this is a tough schedule that they have to play. They knew that going into the season. It's not getting much easier. The Richmond game might be a little easier at this point, but so yeah, they can't afford too many slip-ups because you get to that stage. They got a big win over Virginia Tech. The worst thing that can happen for this program is if you get the big win over Virginia Tech and you don't make the playoffs. So they've got their work cut out for them, and they haven't been playing great football. I mean, since that Tech win, they haven't been playing great football. So we'll see if Mickey can turn it around and get them out there playing the level of football that they did, that they took them to victory in Blacksburg. I haven't seen it since, but we have yet to see what they can do the rest of the season.
Hey, Chris, really quick, for what we look for coming days sports-wise from the Augusta Free Press and also Virginia Sports Online.
Well, I'll catch up with, we've got some UVA basketball coverage coming up. Media Day was last week, and basketball season's not that far away, really, just 3 or 4 weeks away from the start of the the 2010-2011 college basketball season. Also, I'll be in Charlottesville this weekend for the UNC game. It's a 6 o'clock kickoff. I'll be doing a live blog on vasportsonline.com and coverage after the game, a game story and column and podcast of Mike London's post-game interview, and we'll also try to get into Butch Davis's post-game interview as well for that. So a lot of coverage there, and we'll try to keep up with the rest of what's going on in college football on Saturday as well. So some basketball, a little bit of a lot of football, and you can expect that this time of year.